Now let's gather some other pieces that we can use to kind of finish out our game res geometry. So again, with the geometry that you've created in your initial course, you should have a belt in here. And so this is the one that I'm talking about, this piece right here. And so what we can do here is the same thing that we did with the cowl. That is, I want to smooth it so that I don't get the chunky look to it. And then I can go back in and delete some of the edges and give it a little bit less resolution in some of those areas. So first I'm going to start to collect some of these things, and I've just got them in a closed base group. So wherever you have those, or if you're using this project file, you can do the same thing. I'm just going to hit Shift P to drop it out. And then I'm going to select all of the other belt pieces that I have. So the belt buckle here, and then you can see this front piece was created only in ZBrush. There wasn't any low res piece, and we brought it back in as the high res. And so I'm actually going to make a copy of this. So I'll create that, make a duplicate, and drop that duplicate out. And then I'm going to remove it from that group, turn back on referencing. And so now I'm left with this. So I've got the belt, the buckle high, and then there's also a back piece that you may have. I'm going to drop that out as well. All right, so now I'm going to turn off this high resolution for a minute. And let's also turn off our base. All right, so now I'm going to take the belt here. Let's go ahead and smooth it. And I'll just smooth it one division. You can see gives us a much nicer flow. Now we don't need all of these lines in here. So I can start to go in and delete those like that. And then any of these lines in here, usually I'll go in and see if it's not affecting the shape, I figure it's good to delete. So I can go ahead and get rid of it there. Okay, so something like that. We can do the same thing on the back. Just going to smooth this and then go back in, and I can get rid of a lot of these edges. Something like that. And if it was a bit higher res, you could go in and you could spend a little bit more time, but it's not actually that high res. Now this piece, so we've got the belt. These objects will already work for this. This piece though is a bit too high res, and so what I want to do is go to Mesh, and Remesh and Retopologize are two features that have been kind of standardized into the Maya interface. They've existed a little bit longer, but they're actually in the interface now with 2020. And so I'm going to do a quick remesh, and I'm going to just use the default settings. Okay, and then I'm going to do a retopo, and let's also just do default settings and see what that gives us. So you can see that decreased things quite a lot. If you wanted to go in and do it maybe at 500, you can see you can lower it down even more. We could also manually come in and tweak this. So for instance, you can grab this edge and delete it. Let me actually delete the history on this. And we could do the same thing in here. We could kind of do some manual retopo on these. Same thing kind of in here. You could get rid of edges like that. And then in any of these areas where they're these kind of straight areas, you could do like every other one. Something like that. And make sure we don't have anything else selected there. We still want to keep the kind of clean edge flow. And something like that. And so we can really very quickly start to clean that up. We'll do kind of one side here. Let's do this side. Again, I'll try to avoid that one. Try to avoid where there's a curve there maybe, because in those areas you are going to see it's going to become sharper, but in areas that's pretty straight shot, you can very quickly and easily get rid of some of those edges without changing the shape. So maybe something like that, maybe something like that. Again, you can come in and start to get rid of some of these edges. In this case, it created kind of a spiral. So you could try it and see what you get, but you could also kind of redraw this line so that you don't have that issue, and then you could get rid of the whole front of it. So for instance, here we could manually get rid of that. Go ahead and get rid of that one. And let's go ahead and isolate this for a second. And then we want to do the same thing on the other side. So we can get rid of that edge. And this one, So now we've got that. Now all we have to do is come in with our multi-cut, and we could draw across like that, maybe like that. So there are definitely ways that we can start to come in here and clean this up. This edge isn't really doing too much either. And so we could, get it down pretty low. All right. So now we've got our belt. We could go ahead and group that together if we wanted to. So belt, buckle, and wood. And I've just got a creature game group going here. So I could just call this something like belt group. Just grabbing what I need from out of this raw geometry that I used to create the initial model. All right. So the next things that we're going to pull out of there are going to be the pads. The pads we didn't do anything with when we created those. We didn't actually need to sculpt them. And so when we built those in course 1, we can actually use those as the low res. We may need to smooth them and then reduce just because of the silhouette. Now let's start to assemble some of the other pieces of our geometry. So as I said in my project files, I'm working with the geometry that I created back in project 1. So if you've got that, make sure that you take a look at that and reuse it if you can. So we've got the belt. Let's look at some of the other pieces that we want to go ahead and bring in. And these are pieces that I built in Maya that we didn't do anything to. We didn't sculpt or anything. And so we can actually, they're low enough that we can reuse those. So I'm thinking about the hooks. And we can go ahead and bring that down into our game. The hinges, I think will both work. Okay. The sashes, and we don't need the armband because that's been included in that low res base mesh. Now we do have all the pads, and all of the pads, if we isolate these, all of the pads will work as is. The only problem is we have the same issue on some of these larger pieces that we had with the cowl, and that is that the silhouette is really, really chunky. And so what I would do is I would just do the exact same thing I did with the wood. Let's actually smooth it to get that silhouette. And then I'm just going to cut off half of it. And then go in and I'll do the exact same thing I did with the wood. So coming in here and looking at, maybe there are some edges that we can get rid of. So maybe this one is extraneous. You can see it doesn't change the shape very much. And then we can come in here and, for instance, in some of these areas, we can start to get rid of some of these edges. So looking at this, and we can kind of see where it ends up down here. Go ahead and delete that. We get rid of this one and this one. And it's just now going to be kind of cleaning up this geometry. That actually ends up defining kind of the edge there. So from here, we can go in and we can start to merge together. You can see and start to move some points around a little bit and kind of smooth things out a little. And we can just get this down a bit lower, just like we did with the other piece. And you can see in here, we can really start to take our resolution down as we start to consolidate some of these points together as they come off of the bottom. Again, keeping the number here, but then as we start to come up into the top here, we can really reduce that number. Okay, starting to merge some of these together and across. All right, so something like that. You just want to keep going. Here you can see that we've got several points that have been kind of brought down here. And so a real quick way to fix that would just be to draw this out across like that, and then go in and get rid of these points or these edges, kind of like that. And then we could do the same thing here and get rid of those. And if you want to merge those together, again, making sure to keep the perimeter. All right. For things like the belt pad, this is like super low resolution. And so I'm just going to actually smooth this one time. And I think that's probably good. We keep that. And, you could come in here and get rid of a few of these lines, but it was so low resolution to start with. Same thing with these. We can go ahead and just smooth those down for the pads. So you'll grab those pads and we can move them down. Obviously you want to finish the one for the cowl, the resolution for it. And then we also have the wood pieces, the hip pieces. And so again, same technique. I'll go ahead and smooth it and then look at that. I think that's probably, it's going to be a little bit chunky, but I think that's okay. Take a look and see if there are any of these edges we can get rid of. Usually the one around the top there is one we can get rid of there. And then I think we can even get rid of this middle one like that. And you could come in and merge those, but I think it's pretty low res already. And I'm going to leave the mirroring until later. And so I'm actually going to get rid of this one. And let's actually get rid of the pad as well. Just because it's going to be a little bit easier when we create the UVs to then mirror it after that. Because if we mirror that before, then we'll have to create UVs twice. You can transfer UVs as well. Since I'm here at the beginning anyway, I'll go ahead and wait to mirror those over. So let's take the wood and move it down into our group. And now we're done with that. And so now this is going to be the geometry we're working with. You can see I haven't mirrored the body yet, but we've got kind of the pieces assembled in here. So the next thing that we want to do is start to work on some UVs and completing the geometry. So we'll work on the eyes first. We want to get the UVs done and then separate it out into materials, because that's how Substance Painter is going to view our geometry. We want to separate it in a way that makes sense for us. So we'll do that next.